Barnaby Joyce. Meanwhile, another piece of the housing puzzle could soon be in place, as we just heard with Jen Beshwadi. There's a plan to allow retirees to downsize their home without being subject to superannuation limits with the proceeds. The Australian Financial Review reports it could be part of the government's budget as part of its housing affordability plan. Joining me now is Liberal MP Luke Howarth for a little bit more on this. Luke Howarth, thanks for your time today. Thoughts, first of all, on this in the Australian Financial Review today. The plan would basically mean that, you know, you sell a house if you're a couple, maybe it's worth a lot more than your downsized house. You have $500,000, you might go over your tax-free super threshold. Well, that would be exempted. Would it be tricky to perhaps administer, do you think? Red tape?
Well, that's a good point, Tom, and it's great to be on your program today. But I think whenever we're introducing new policy or when we're working out what we're actually putting in the budget, as the Treasurer does, it's very important. It's one of our core principles as Liberal Nationals, is to make sure that we don't create new red tape. It's very important that we communicate with accountants, financial advisors, people involved in those industries right around Australia, especially right now in the lead up to the end of the financial year, that we don't create new red tape and that they understand exactly what we're doing. But I certainly support anything that helps self-funded retirees or retirees that are looking to downgrade. Supporting them is always a good thing to do, and I look forward to seeing what is in the budget.
Not just red tape, but maybe red-faced. Labor had a trial in this policy area that Tony Abbott scrapped. Is it a little bit embarrassing to be going back to this particular area?
Oh, look, any good policy, if it's good policy and it's going to help people right around the nation, then we should be looking at it. It might have been rushed before by the previous government, but if obviously the Treasurer, the Prime Minister and the Cabinet can get that right, then of course I'd support it. I have a large percentage of self-funded retirees and pensioners in my electorate. Some of them do look to downsize and perhaps get a smaller home, move into retirement villages, but most people still live at home. Anything that we can do to support them is policy that I support, and I look forward to.
And just on your electorate, Luke Howarth, what are people in your electorate telling you about housing affordability?
Well, my electorate's vastly different from Sydney and Melbourne, Tom. In parts of my electorate, you can still buy a house, for example, for under $300,000 with a 2 in it. In places like Deception Bay and Fitzgibbon, there's a number of homes for sale. So it's not a big issue in my electorate as perhaps in some of the other capital cities. Part of my electorate is in Brisbane City Council, part of it is in Moreton Bay. But certainly the best thing that we can do to help people around housing affordability is to make sure that they have a job, to make sure that they have good job security. And that's why last week you saw the government scrap the 457 visa, putting Australian workers first, making sure that
well, just on that, Luke Howarth, on, you know, job security the best way, you sort of loosely backed recently Joe Hockey's comments on get a better job. You said the message was a bit blunt, but that does hold true. Is that not a bit simplistic? I mean, no one out there is turning down pay increases. If we all suddenly had more money, surely housing would go up more. What's the sort of extension of that argument? You need a better job and for other people not to? I mean, everybody can't get a better job, can they?
No, well, first of all, people actually need a job. People actually need a job. They have somewhere to go on a Monday morning and a pay packet to actually be able to afford to buy a home. But if you want to talk about simplistic arguments, let's look at what Bill Shorten and Labor are saying around housing affordability. They're saying, you know, if you just tackle some of the investors, all of a sudden housing will become cheaper. People will be able to afford to buy a home. I mean, it's absolute rot. They said the same thing around the NDIS when they introduced that policy. If we bring in the NDIS...
But okay, just on that one, I mean, they're saying get investors out and first home buyers in. Your line on, you know, get a better job, you can get investors out and first home buyers in, whether or not you agree with the policy. Your line on just getting a better job, if everyone gets a better job, all the prices go up, don't they?
Well, there's a whole lot of issues that affect housing affordability, and as I say, we've got a plan for jobs which we're implementing right now around our free trade agreements, our defence manufacturing, our company tax reductions to help more businesses employ more people. That's very important. So getting a job and holding a job is probably the best thing the government can do. But when you look at housing affordability, you've got things like state government stamp duty, you've got things like land tax, you've got things like mortgage insurance, which is a big barrier to young people getting into a house if they don't have a 20% deposit. Councils play a very big role, Tom. I know that developers can often spend 40 or 50,000 on greenfield estates before the block even goes on the market. You're up for 50 grand in council fees. So the idea from Bill Shorten that this one little policy will all of a sudden fix everything is complete absurdity, and it shows again that it hasn't been thought through. It is an issue that all governments should look at, and we should be working bipartisanly to improve all areas. But this one fixed policy, and I can tell you right now, any policy that makes house prices fall would be bad for the people of Petrie. It'd be bad for my electorate and right around the country. Self-funded retirees, people on pensions don't want to see their house prices fall. Neither do young people that are into their first home that perhaps have put down a 10% deposit and all of a sudden the house drops by 15%. Where's it going to leave them?
Luke Howarth, I'm interested in getting your view on the controversy around ABC presenter Yassmin Abdel-Magied's comments on Anzac Day yesterday. What did you make of those?
Look, I was busy in my electorate yesterday at 3 different services, so I didn't actually hear them other than what you've reported now. But I think the comments that she made, that I've just seen reported on your show, is driving more people in Queensland to parties like One Nation. She's completely out of touch. She doesn't represent mainstream Australia. She certainly doesn't represent most people in Queensland. I mean, you look at her comments on Q&A just a couple of months ago in relation to Islam and how it's helped women's equality. I mean, what rubbish that this woman presents on a daily basis. So I think she's completely out of touch and, yeah, doesn't represent mainstream Australia.
Thank you, Luke Howarth, for your time this morning.
Thank you.